Welcome back to Switch2Linux. It is Monday and it is time for another Linux Top 5. And today we are going to talk about the discussion of your distro doesn't matter. You see, in the Linux community and in the Linux world, there's always discussion, which is the best distro to pick? Which distro should I use? And I've done a lot of videos asking questions about what distro you might want to use. In fact, last week, I'll refer you back to that one, there was a video about the questions you would ask to figure out which distro you would like to use. But today we're going to talk about why it really doesn't matter which distro you're using. Is this a contradiction in terms? Not at all. What I'm trying to do here is suggest that yes, there's probably some distros that may work better in some circumstances. For an average user who just needs to use a computer for browsing the web, checking emails, things like that, it probably doesn't matter. So let's go ahead and talk about 5 reasons why your distro does not actually matter. Number 1, for the most part, you get the same packages. There's going to be some differences. Is it going to be, in the repository, or is it going to be something like a snap pack or a flat pack or an app image or things like that? And there's some different discussions we can have that for the basic new users probably don't need to understand that quite yet. All right. And there are also some differences on which package versions. Is it the latest version? Is it the latest security updated version? Whatever else. And for the most part, unless you specifically know you exactly need this version for this reason, it probably isn't going to make a lot of difference as to which package you're using. So just use whatever's on the system. In some instances, I'm a writer, I write books, and I'm working on teaching people how to do that. So I do want to have the latest version of the LibreOffice package. But if I was just writing for the sake of writing, I really wouldn't care quite as much. It doesn't really matter. They will have the same functionality. Now, occasionally, a package will come out with better support, or a package comes out with worse support, in which case you might want to make some adjustments and some changes based upon that. But for the most part, unless you have very specific needs, pretty much most of your Linux distributions are going to have pretty much the same Linux packages. So it doesn't really matter which distro you use. Number 2, distros are going to be stable. We're talking about reasonably stable. If you download something that's not an alpha and not a beta, it's probably not going to give you a lot of problems. I know Arch sometimes has a reputation for crashing a lot during updates. It doesn't happen as much as one may think. Debian has a more reputation for being stable. Again, I haven't had any issues with updating Debian. I haven't really had issues with updating Manjaro, which is also based on Arch. So as long as you're not in the alpha or beta branches, you're going to have reasonable stability for the most case. And in reality, just make sure that you always have good backups. And if your distro dies out, rebuild it. It's pretty easy to do. So it doesn't really matter which distro because they're all going to be reasonably stable. Number 3, no matter your desktop environment of choice, you will probably be able to find, as long as at least you're in your major distributions, that any type of desktop environment you want to run is probably going to be available. If not officially supported, certainly installable. This may not be the case with some small off-the-side distros. If you want to use Solus, for example, you're going to be stuck with whichever one of the desktop environments they give you. Of course, they give you Budgie, and there's other versions of it as well, other desktops as well. Outside of that, though, you're not going to have the similar package bases. Debian, most distros will be over there. Arch, for sure. Antergos, Manjaro, Ubuntu, all officially supported flavors. Even Mint doesn't have, Mint has 3 official flavors, but I have installation instructions for putting both KDE and Budgie on Linux Mint. So it really doesn't matter. You'll have similar desktop choices no matter what. And if all you're doing is utilizing a computer for checking email, getting on the internet, doing whatever other things you want to do online, it's not going to make a difference which distribution you're going to run. Number 4. Pretty much any Linux distribution, as long as it's a modern, current release distribution, it's going to be reasonably secure. Now, of course, those little exceptions, if you're high security minded, if you're, a journalist carrying sensitive documents and things like that, you're going to want something more advanced like Tails or Qubes or something like that. But for the most part, any Linux distribution that you get is going to be very reasonably stable. It's going to be very reasonably private. And you're not going to have issues with stealing your data or with a lot of viruses back and forth. There's not going to be one distro that's going to be better than other distros outside of the ones that are specifically targeted for security and privacy in mind. So with that being said, if all you need to do is just have a distribution which is going to be reasonably stable, it doesn't matter if you're an Arch, Ubuntu, Debian, Elementary, no matter what, they're all going to be good. Just find one that works for you and use that, because it's a lot more safe on your private data for sure than a Windows or a Mac system would be. And our number 5 reason why it doesn't matter which Linux distribution you use, for the most part, most Linux distributions are going to work on most hardware. Now, if you find a case where a distribution is just not working well on your hardware, just try a different one. If you find, for example, you're on Mint and something doesn't work right, try something else. Give Manjaro a try. Give Elementary a try. Give Arch a try if you're brave enough. There's a lot of distributions that are out there. Not every distribution works absolutely perfectly on every piece of hardware, and no one can tell you exactly. Only you can. You can experiment. Do trial and error. But for the most part, any Linux distribution is going to work for most hardware configurations that you're going to get. If you have weird exceptions to that, just hunt around and look around for different Linux distributions that are going to help you out. So those are my 5 reasons why it doesn't really matter which distribution you're using, especially if you're just using your computer for very simple home-based stuff. Of course, home-based stuff, what is that? You know, like I said, internet, email, maybe listening to music, maybe watching some videos, things like that. Any distribution is going to work. Just find one that works for you and stick with it. Find a desktop that works for you and stick with it. Take a look at the links in the description down below and carded throughout this video for some more tips and tricks on switching to Linux. I hope you've enjoyed this video from Switched to Linux. If you'd like to help support the channel, check out the links at the top. There is another video over here. You can check out our Patreon page down here. And you can check out shop.switchedtolinux.com for information on a t-shirt like this or some other designs. Thanks for watching, and I hope that you enjoy switching to Linux.